Hi, my name is TJ. This is In My Own Words, helping you create your life story. Well, welcome back to episode 2 of 5. There are going to be 5 of these videos talking about all different aspects, all different elements of creating your life story. Today's a bit of a fun one. Today we get to talk about what to include. What are you actually going to put into your life story? What things are you going to talk about? What things are you not going to talk about? And how you're going to structure it, and why it's important to go through a process early on of identifying the areas that you want to talk about. So let's talk about that now. This is a little bit of information on structuring the chapters of your life story. So why is it important to structure everything? When anybody writes a book, whether that be fictional book, which they're going to break down into chapters, or whether it be a factual book, which can be broken down a whole number of different ways, it's important to remember that your audience don't live in your head, they don't live in your mind, and they can't always follow your line of thought. So to break the information down into smaller, more manageable sections is useful for 2 main reasons, I would suggest. Firstly, it keeps you, the storyteller or the information giver, to a relatively rigid schedule of, this is what I'm going to talk about in this section, which means that you're less likely to tangent and talk about something else completely different, but has this sort of link to the thing that you've been talking about currently. I think when that happens in natural conversation, I've been on the other side of the table when somebody has just tangented massively in a certain direction, and I'm going, sorry, are we still talking about work, or are we? Because now you're talking about family, and I'm lost. And it's because I'm not inside your mind. That link made sense to the person telling the information, but I need to be caught up in that little dialogue, that little back and forth as to what's going on. The other reason I think it's really important is because it breaks everything down into bite-sized pieces for both the storyteller and the audience. So you feel, as the person giving the information, like you're giving it in chunks that are manageable. You don't have to just sit and give all the information out all in one go and end up with 90 minutes of audio or video where you've just rambled completely unstructured in a completely incoherent way. Well, not incoherent necessarily, but certainly unstructured, in a totally unstructured way. If you're able to compartmentalize and go, right, this section is about my early school life, and then you can stick to all of the information that fits that remit, and you can keep that close by. So to minimize the risk and the temptation of deviating down a certain channel, if you have that little reminder, whether it be something that's written down on a piece of paper, or whether you keep your notes in front of you, as I do. There's no shame in that. There you go. There's my notes, right? But you wouldn't know that unless I showed them to you. So again, it's all about managing the moment and sticking to your task. And of course, for the audience, it means that they are able to comprehend those moments as well. It also means that they can watch sections at a time and feel like you would settle down with a book and read a chapter at a time. Or you're looking at your watch and you're going, I've got time to get through 2 chapters here. That's a nice feeling to have, because even if you end up sitting down and reading 10 chapters, at least you made time to sit down and read it. And you were enjoying it so much that you ended up reading an extra 8 chapters, which is a good thing, because it's nice, as long as you didn't miss an appointment. It's nice to be able to do that. And of course you can set the book down and you can pick it up later on and you can read a little bit more. And the same with video and audio as well. You can set aside some time to sit down and listen and watch a few sections. And also, the nature of video content and audio content is that if there's something particularly funny or interesting that you want to show other people, it makes it a lot easier to skip to certain sections to show people, and you can also break down that content into smaller sized bits of content for, if you wanted to put it on social channels or something like that. Okay, so there are different ways of structuring the same information. You might like to structure it in chronological order. That's what my dad did with his life story. I think that's what I would do with mine as well, because in my head that makes sense, but that might not make sense for everyone. So what do I mean by that? There are different ways of presenting the same information. So you might say, my earliest memories, my early school years, my later school years, moving into my first time in employment and my first job, and you might continue the trend that way. Alternatively, you might like to take themes and strands that span the entire course of your life and talk about that all in one go. So for example, relationships I've had. You might like to say, I remember my first girlfriend, I remember my first boyfriend, I remember my first partner. The impact of, the kind of things that we enjoyed doing together, the kind of ways that I grew during that relationship. It might be the impact of pets that you've had in your lifetime. And of course, you're able to cross-reference, so you're able to talk about the next long-term girlfriend or boyfriend that you had. You're able to talk about the next dog that you had. You're able to talk about when you brought the cat in and the dog and the cat had to live together. It could be all sorts of things like this. It could be where you lived. I've spent in my own personal life, I've lived in London twice, on 2 separate occasions, and it had a major impact on me both times that I lived there. Actually, technically 3 times, because I went to a school in London for a year, and I hated it. And I went for 1 year to a private school in London. The people were lovely. I made lots of friends and had a really good time hanging out with them and learning with them. And it was a lovely school, and I have no complaints about the teaching staff. But being in London had a big impact on my mental health, my well-being. These are words that I can use now but couldn't necessarily articulate at the time. And it's really interesting to look back and think about it now and be able to put some context around how I must have felt and what I must have been dealing with at the time as a 13-year-old living away from home. So I might like to talk about that, and then I might like to talk about when I went back to London the second time, and when I went back to London the third time. I've also lived on ships in my lifetime, and the impact of living abroad or being at sea and having that nomad kind of lifestyle. And then, of course, coming home and coming back to England and coming back to my hometown and my home county, and the positive impact that that's had on my life, but also where I've had to learn to grow as a result of that, and things that I'm bringing back with me in terms of my cultural education and my social and political education, having lived in different areas of the country and different parts of the world. So I might like to talk about all of that all in one go. And that would make a really fascinating and interesting segment. So the point is only this. There are different ways of structuring the information that you're going to get across. And it's a creative, exploratory process, putting down on the paper, in note format initially, everything that you want to tell, and then identifying the structure that you're going to deliver that information in, whether it be chapters in a book or whether it be chapters on film or in an audio podcast. But certainly compartmentalizing in those ways, I think, will help people find the common thread that runs through each piece of information that you're going to talk about, and I think it will keep both yourself as the storyteller and your audience on track. So that's a little bit about the benefits of actually structuring the process in the first place. And now let's talk a little bit about what those chapters or episodes might actually be. There's a multitude of things that you could consider. I'm only going to go through a few things that I think are interesting, or that we've tried before, and a few little hints and tips around perhaps a few things to avoid, or why certain things might be enjoyable to speak about. And of course, the essential thing that underpins all of this, which we're going to keep talking about through these episodes, which is coming back to your audience. What sort of things do they want to know about? You are writing this, you are recording this with a certain person in mind, I'm sure, or people in mind, I'm sure. And with that being said, you always want to make sure that it is playing to what they are going to get the most out of. So yeah, let's have a little breakdown into the various chapters and why I think they're fun, starting with this one. Early childhood. This is obviously a great place to start, but also, I mean, you might want to start with something that's perhaps a little bit easier to remember than your very early childhood. When I say that, I mean sort of like before school time. So we're talking about, being 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, possibly 5 years old, something like that. And a lot of this might depend on looking back at photos that other people have taken, maybe the stories that other people can remember of that time period. And yeah, just channeling as much as you can possibly remember. It might also be the case that you want to re-familiarize yourself with certain things of the time. Let's just talk about that for 1 second. If I'm trying to remember my early childhood, I might like to think of a program that was on TV. Okay, so oddly enough, I remember a show called Super Ted. Okay, wasn't a hugely popular TV show, but a lot of people know it. A lot of people watched it. It was on TV around about the time when I was about 3-4 years old. Thomas the Tank Engine is another good one. See now, oh my God, real time version of exactly what I'm talking about. As soon as you start living in that moment, other things start to come back to you. And you start, oh yeah, this, and there was that, and there was this, and there was... yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I could probably do that a few more times, but I won't. I'll try and stay focused. But yeah, Thomas the Tank Engine, Super Ted. If I go, they're all coming back to me now. I remember watching Blockbusters as a kid. Who remembers Blockbusters with Bob Holness? Anyway, yeah, they're all. It's all around the same time. Thunderbirds. I need a pen and paper. I need to make a note of everything that I'm thinking of. YouTube is a fantastic resource for all things that you're trying to remember, because people are uploading things from years and years and years ago with the sole purpose of that nostalgic hit, of people enjoying remembering a simpler time, an easier time, or certainly a different time. So let's take one of those programs as an example. Super Ted, okay? It's a good example because it was of its era. I don't believe that it's come back into circulation since. I had a VHS somewhere with Super Ted on it. For those of you who don't know what a VHS is, by the way, because there'll definitely be people watching this now and in the future who'll be like, what's a VHS? Before online content, before digital streaming media, we had DVDs, and before that we had VHS, and it was basically like a cassette tape, and you put it into your VHS player, or if your TV had a VHS setting on it, you'd pop it in and it would play, and you had to rewind it physically all the way back to the beginning. So yeah, there's a little bit of context around that. I had a VHS. Can I remember where it is? No. Would I know where to start looking? Probably not. If I found it, would I have a VHS player to watch it? No. So what do? YouTube is this extraordinary wealth of information. It's the second highest used search engine in the world after Google. So if you have something that you want to try and remember, if I go, and I did this recently actually, I typed in Super Ted into YouTube, and I found a number of episodes, and one of them was the actual episode that I had recorded on VHS, and I was watching it and thinking, it's been 35 years since I've seen this episode. It was an extraordinary process to go through, because you're re-exploring neuro pathways in your mind, in your brain, to do with memories, and you're opening up those channels again. And by doing that, you're going to open up pathways to other things that you thought you'd forgotten. So I would definitely recommend pop yourself on search engines, especially YouTube, and sit and watch some of the things that you can vaguely remember and live in that moment again. You know, think about, I mean, my mum used to watch, I think it was Muffin the Mule. I think it was Muffin the Mule. Bill and Ben as well was another one. These are not programs that were on TV when I was a kid, but they were on TV when my mum and dad were kids. Pretty sure it's Muffin the Mule. Certainly Bill and Ben. And I have absolutely no doubt that if you go onto YouTube and you type in Bill and Ben original series UK, you're going to get masses and masses and masses of hits, and you can sit and watch them again, and it will take you back to that time. I do think, in addition to everything that we've just said about specific memories, a lot of the stuff with early childhood memories is going to probably talk about relationships within the family, historical events that you can't necessarily remember, but that you know that they happened, and you've heard other people's versions of those stories, and you might like to pass that on as well. So talking about when your baby sister was born, and some of the memories that your parents may have passed on to you. They're not necessarily your own memories, but important, I think, to talk about the milestones in your life. And I think it might be more of a historical retelling than an engaging delivery and an impassioned and emotional delivery of a story and a memory. But certainly an extremely important period to cover in your life. Family history. I should start by saying that one of the best things from my point of view as my dad's audience when he was creating his life story, one of the best things that I got out of that process was learning a little bit more about his parents, my grandparents. I knew so little about them. Unfortunately, they've passed away now, and I was quite young, certainly too young to have any kind of like mature adult conversations with them and get to know them as people. And I'd reached a point in my life where I did want to know a little bit more about them, and so I was able to hear firsthand his recollections, his recounts of events, learn a little bit more about his relationship with them. I learnt about what they did for a living, which I had no idea about. Obviously, in my eyes, they were just Granny and Grandpa, and it really humanised them. And to hear a combination, actually, of his early life in his first family home with them and what that experience was like, and also a little bit into the dynamic of his relationship with them, was absolutely fascinating from my point of view. And the other thing is that it contextualizes relationships that you have with your own parents. Similarly, when he started to speak about being a dad, it really had an impact on me, becoming a dad and the relationship I was going to have with my children. And so it was this real like light bulb moment. I don't want to get too cheesy and say like the circle of life. But yeah, hearing about his relationship with his parents provided a lot of context on my relationship with my own parents. And similarly with his relationship with me as his child, that gave me a lot of context on my relationship with my kids. You can deep dive into all sorts of things with family history. You could go back several generations if you're particularly well versed and knowledgeable about that, or you can stick to what you know and talk in more detail about the immediate generations prior. But I think that it's, you're talking about a time when things were so totally different, and some of the detail in that is really fascinating. That's definitely something that I would encourage that you cover. Education. Another one that seems like an obvious choice. I think that, so at school days are our best days, apparently. And everybody has a different experience at school. I think, again, these early memories can really serve as a way of understanding the person that you're listening to, what shaped them as a child and as a young adult, invariably we see that manifest in later life in terms of, you know, the way that they present, their personality traits, their relationships. Education is obviously a fundamental part of that. I think details about school and their experience there is a fantastic topic to talk about. Friendships, you know, when you're talking about later on in your school life, you can also perhaps venture into boyfriends and girlfriends, possibly. You could talk about after school clubs, favourite subjects, favourite teachers, the contrast between primary school and secondary school, and maybe, you know, later on. You could even speak, if you went to university, you could speak about your time at university. And really, education is a lifelong thing. So if you wanted to extend that out into, you know, I've always enjoyed learning, and learning in later life has been fascinating because I've gravitated towards online courses, and that, you know, that's really been something that I've enjoyed. So it doesn't need to just stop with your childhood. I think education and some of the many fun and interesting experiences that people had at school. I know that my dad liked to talk about swimming lessons, and he you know, he had a bit of a not a phobia, but he didn't particularly like swimming, and clearly that has stuck with him, and he felt he could talk about that in such detail because it was this emotional thing for him, this emotional process that he lived with him. And I'm the same, and again, that contextualized it for me because I never liked swimming. I'm desperate not to pass that on to my own children. I want them to enjoy swimming, but I never particularly liked it. And hearing him talk about it and all the, you know, the fear of diving into the water is something that I share his distaste for that sort of thing. I'm not much of a diver. I can swim, and that's no problem. Do you know what? I'm going to tangent slightly, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience swimming at school. And we used to go to a swimming bath in Wigston in Leicestershire, and they would always say to us on race day, you can either dive into the swimming pool to start your race, or you can start in the water and push off from the wall. And I would always push off from the wall because I am not an athlete in that way. And I always felt very out of control diving into the swimming pool, and I just didn't like the idea of going headfirst into something. And so, I would always start in the pool, and that gave me a massive deficit when I started the race, and I would always catch people up by the end because I was a reasonably quick swimmer, even if I wasn't a very good swimmer. So across sort of 50 metres, I would catch people up. And people used to say to me, oh, you know, if you only dove into the water, you'd be, you know, somebody who could swim really fast, and that could be, you know, something that you could explore if you wanted to join a swimming club or something like that. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks, that is not for me. But anyway, it just contextualized that, knowing that my dad felt the same way, and it brought a smile to my face, and it did encourage me to think about my swimming lessons when I was a kid. So it's a little insight into who they were as a kid, and how that might have impacted you in your own childhood. Friendships. This is an interesting one. Obviously, our friendships play a huge part in who we become as people, how we develop our work ethic, how we develop our sense of humour, how we develop our social patterns and traits, what we enjoy, our hobbies and interests. I think friends, inevitably, most friendships tend to break down. And if you're talking about friendships from your early years, then it's likely that those people won't be part of your life anymore, with the nature of, you know, just time moving on and people drifting apart. And there can come a sort of melancholy with that. I wouldn't try to avoid that. I try to embrace that, and help that to, you know, use that to help you reflect on the relationships that you used to have. In this day and age where we have Facebook and so many ways of being in touch with people and refinding people, it might even encourage you to reach out to those people and say, I know it's been an awfully long time, but if you ever fancied getting together for a coffee, it'd be lovely to have a catch-up and reminisce. I've been through this process of recording my life story. I mentioned you because we were so close when we were at school together, or when we were at university together, or whatever it might be. I think inevitably you're going to talk about some of your best friends throughout your life. Don't shy away from that, and focus on all the positives that they brought to your life. Passions and hobbies. Inevitably, with the passing of time, we become a little bit more consumed with work, a little bit more consumed with family, a little bit more consumed with, the slightly more, dare I say, monotonous elements of adult life. And so it might be nice to lean into your passions and hobbies from when you were a child and let that, extend into adulthood, if you still have things that you're passionate about. And the reason I would highly encourage this particular topic of conversation is because inevitably you are going to be excitable and interested, and your face is going to light up and you're going to smile talking about the things that you really enjoy. And that is one of the biggest insights I think that you can give to people is, work is something that almost everyone experiences, and there's tangible elements that people can relate to. Same with relationships, but with hobbies and interests, I think that you may have a hobby that other people don't necessarily share, and it's lovely to hear about it, especially through the eyes of somebody who has enjoyed it for a long time or enjoyed it passionately. I think this is a lovely topic of conversation to get people energized. In fact, I'm going to go a stage further. I'm going to say, might be nice to start your filming or your writing talking about something that you're extremely passionate about, because I think that will help you find your voice, which is leaning into something that we mentioned in the first episode. It's just a great topic of conversation to become energized and enthused about the whole process. Career and work. This isn't for everyone. Some people might have absolutely no interest in talking about their job. For some people, a job is a job. It brings them money and it puts food on the table and it keeps a roof over their head. And they might not be particularly passionate about it, and they might not particularly enjoy it. If there are ever any topics that we're going to talk about in this list, or any topics that might occur to you yourself that you don't feel particularly passionate about, I would say don't include them, because there's no point in referencing things just because it's something that has happened in your life if you don't really have anything to say about it, or if you're not particularly excited, passionate, or have much experience in it. Work is one of those topics that could go either way. Some people live for their career. If that's you, definitely spend a lot of time focusing on mapping your career, how you started, the impact of certain bosses and colleagues and co-workers, the reputation that you've built, any success that you've built for yourself. There'll be people out there who are business owners for whom it's not just a huge part of their life. It is their lifestyle, is being a business owner. Most of the things that will have made them who they are today will have come about by being a business owner and doing their own networking, their own advertising, their own concept creation, their own production line, managing people. And I think for everybody else who has had a career where they've been an employee of some sort, you can still talk about the important working relationships, what you learned from working at different companies. Maybe your work took you around the world. If there are things that you benefited from by working in the sector that you worked in, or having the certain job that you had, I would definitely encourage exploring that process, even if you don't decide to include it at the end, because you're like, do you know what? This isn't the important part of what I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about other topics in more detail. Then so be it. But it's definitely one worth exploring. Challenges and adversity. For your audience, this might be one of the most eye-opening topics to talk about. When we face challenges or adversity, it allows us to grow as people. It allows us to come through the other side and be a more developed, well-rounded person at the end of that process. It really shapes who we are as people. It's also an opportunity to focus on something extremely positive. Life sends all of us many challenges in various different ways, and they all affect us differently. And, some people might look at something in my life that I consider to have been a challenge, and they might say, oh, you don't know the half of it. You've lived a life of privilege compared to what I had to go through. That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. But this is what I had to deal with. It was a very difficult time in my life, and it's really helped shape who I am today. That's a hugely important message to get across. I think if your primary audience is your children, then they need to hear as well that you have triumphed and you've overcome things in your life, because we keep so much from our kids because we don't want to burden their little minds with all the things that are going on in our world, that in their eyes we are faultless, blameless, we have no problems. It's like that couldn't be further from the truth. Actually, what this might be is a process of educating them on the things that actually we have been through that were very difficult, and we got through them, and you can too. And I think that's a hugely important message to get across. Love and relationships. This is another obvious one. Whether it be your first girlfriend at school, or boyfriend at school, whether it be the person that you married, whether it be a second wife or husband, whether it be a third wife or husband, and definitely if you have children, the relationship that you have with them. This is one of the biggest things that shapes who we are as people. I think it's definitely important to touch on the impact that certain people have made on your life and that you have made on theirs. It's what brings us all together. It's what unites us. It is worth mentioning that there may be some relationships that you don't want to include, having explored it in your note sessions and your memory recollections. It may be that there was a divorce. It may be that there was a relationship that went bad. You might find that it's cathartic to talk about it. You might find that what you do by exploring that is remember and appreciate the good times in that relationship. And that might bring a little bit of closure, and that might be a really nice thing to do. Or it might be that actually, I've confirmed the fact that I don't feel comfortable talking about this relationship, and so I will omit that from the edit. So I think, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say don't feel that you have to include every single relationship if you don't feel like it's going to be a positive contribution to the project. With regards to what to talk about within the context of the relationship, there's so many lovely elements to talk about. I mean, if you're talking about a romantic partner, for example, you could talk about the first time you met, you could talk about the first date, first impressions of each other, who introduced you to who came on to who. I mean, there's so many lovely details that paint lovely pictures, really romantic pictures. I think that's such lovely content, and inevitably it will bring a smile, a twinkle in the eye, and that's something that it's really lovely to watch afterwards. Future aspirations. I think this is somewhere where you can really focus on the positives moving forward. We've all got so much that we can still do with our lives. There's so many ways that we can impact the world and the people around us at whatever point in life we're at. And I think that it leans into the whole time capsule element of what I originally foresaw with creating my dad's life story. I think it's very interesting to look back at it in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time and think, did I achieve some of the things that I wanted to achieve? Did my predictions come true? Because I think that's quite a fun game to play, is what do you think your grandchild is going to grow up to be? What do you think the future of the country is going to look like? What's one crazy prediction that you have for, how people are going to live in the future? That can be quite a fun game to play. I think that things that you still want to achieve is a really positive outcome for talking about not just where you've come from, but where you still want to go in life. Spirituality and beliefs. Obviously, it's the case that for a lot of people, their religion, their spirituality, their belief system is very, very important to who they are as people. It also stands to reason that for the majority of people, if they prescribe to a certain religion, for example, that their audience will as well. That is to say, their children, might prescribe to the same religion as well. And a spiritual journey is one that impacts us immensely, and it really does. It's another one that really shapes who we are as people. The early years, the formative years, the relationships, and I think, and work to a certain extent, and then spirituality and your belief system, I think really helps shape who you are as a person. And it can really give an insight into how you came to be the person that you are today. And I think if you are a spiritual person and your child is as well, then they might find a lot of mirroring in circumstances, in your approach to life, based on the teachings and the belief systems that you adhere to. Health and wellness. Now, this is potentially a very tricky topic. It's possible that you might be considering going through this process because you have been unwell, and it's given you an opportunity to reflect and look at your life and decide what's important to you, and that might have, led you down the line of, I'd like to write my life story. This is going to be a very difficult topic to talk about if that's the case, and you're going to have to consider the impact on your audience, the emotional impact on your audience of hearing the story of, whatever health complications you've had through your eyes. It's very possible that there may have been trauma associated with any health conditions that you may have had. It may be that you have lived with a disability for a large part of your life or a small part of your life, and you want to talk about that. I would suggest that the best way of incorporating this into your book or into your film is to focus on the positive impacts that have come out of having any health complications that you may have had, how it's helped to shape you, what you've overcome. Again, we're leaning into other topics here slightly, but yeah, I think that people want to hear that it hasn't broken you, and they want to hear that you feel resilient, you feel strong, you feel empowered. If that's not the case, if it's been nothing but debilitating for you, then I would consider how much you talk about it, how much you want to labour on a subject like that. If it might be a cathartic process for you, and if that's the case, then you should definitely talk about it. I'm thinking purely from the audience point of view. If the audience find it troubling or difficult to watch, and there is no light at the end of the tunnel, for example, then that might be very difficult for them to absorb that any message there. If you've overcome your illness, that's definitely where I think you want to focus on, retelling that story. If living with a disability has made you stronger as a person, if it's been eye-opening with regards to how society has viewed you and how people treat you in the street, then again, if that's a positive thing, then focus on that. If it's a negative thing, then maybe focus on advising future generations of how they could do it better. And again, so then we're leaning into the positive angle on it. And I think as long as you can maintain that positive angle, that's the way to go about it. Travel. For a lot of people, travel has been a very big part of their life. It's, again, been another topic that's really helped shape who they are as people, being exposed to different cultures, different ethnicities, different political ideologies. It is extraordinarily broadening for the mind and the soul, and it can have a lasting impact. I've been very lucky in my life to be able to travel really all over the world and meet lots of different people and work with lots of different people from all over the world, and that's definitely helped shape my approach to working life, my tolerance of different people and different backgrounds, and different value systems and cultures. And it's definitely been a big part of my life. I also love to travel. I love seeing new places. I think with me, it almost leans into a sort of completionist theory of feeling like I need to see all of the world before I pass, which obviously is not possible. But it's lovely to feel like I'm privileged enough to be able to go and see some of the amazing things there are all over the world. And I know that if I create my life story, that's going to feature heavily because I'm very passionate about having those cultural experiences. And so that's really going to, my face is just going to start lighting up as soon as I talk about some of the places that I've been to. For example, let's do this. I'll give you an example. Many years ago now, I was lucky enough to spend 3 weeks doing a small tour in South America. We went to Brazil and Uruguay and Argentina, and I had some amazing experiences on that trip. One of which was going to Iguazu Falls. And if you like waterfalls, if you like natural structures, and if you've never been to Brazil or the rainforest or anything like that, then I would highly recommend you go. It's just like nowhere else on Earth. The way that the geology has structured itself out there and the way that the water flows, I think there's nearly 300 separate waterfalls that all converge in a small area, geographically speaking, and it's just the most amazing place. It's like 10 times the size of Niagara, and you can take a boat right up to the water, and it's just spectacular. And as I'm sure you can tell, that gets me excited, and so that's immediately somewhere where it's like, right, I'm going to concentrate a lot of my attention on this particular element of my life story is travel, because clearly it energizes me and it makes me smile, and I feel very proud of having traveled as much as I have and seen as much as I have, and that's important, I think. Legacy. This might not be a section in its own right. It might be something that permeates throughout the whole piece. But I think certainly, how you've left your mark on the people that you've met in your life, the places that you've lived in your life, that might be through the community as well. Things that you've achieved. I think there should be a heavy focus on the legacy that you are leaving behind. And of course, for a lot of people, their legacy is their family, it's their children, it's their grandchildren. And I think that is a really special and poignant element to focus on for anyone who is going through this process. Treasured possessions. One idea that I had with my dad's life story was to encourage him to think about what are his most treasured possessions. This was something that came to me a little bit later on in the process. And I thought to myself, it would be really lovely to hear him talk about things that he holds dear to his heart. We were able to get some lovely B-roll footage of those items, and it really brought the whole section together to hear him speaking passionately about them, and then get this lovely B-roll footage of the vase or of the picture of the family ring that he spoke about. And it's just really lovely to have that person's context around things that potentially your audience, if your audience are your children, it might be the case that some of these items they stand to inherit. And learning the story behind them, especially for me with regards to some of these items, was lovely, and I will treasure it forever. Creative content. This is probably the most unstructured style of content that I think you could put into somebody's life story. It's mostly done in like short form content, and it can be whatever you want it to be. So let me give you an example of what I mean. One thing that I wanted to do with my dad was give him some short form content, quick fire questions based around his favorites of everything in life. So we created some topics. I think I said, what's your favorite film? What's your favorite band or artist? What's your favorite country that you've ever visited? What's your favorite memory of this? What's your favorite memory of that? And he would give short, sharp answers to those questions. What was your favorite meal? What's your favorite drink? And it was lovely. For example, one of the things that he said when I asked him what his favorite drink was Chateauneuf de Pape, which is a red wine, and I didn't know that. And then the next time I came around for a dinner, I brought a nice bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape, and he looked at me and he went, "Mate, lovely. How did you know?" And I was like, just a little birdie told me, and it was lovely to have those little moments. Really, really, really sweet. And I think that some of those, something that's important to be said with this kind of short form content is it might break up the narrative into like little sections. The way I edited his life stories together was periodically I would drop these little moments throughout the piece, because his film that we made is 90 minutes long, and that's an awful lot of time to sit and watch one person speak, and you want to feel like you're dedicating your energy to watching it, and you want to feel like you're engaged the whole time, because it's almost rude not to be. But one thing that I think helps an audience is to break up those those longer pieces where we're storytelling with more short form content that is arguably a little bit more quickfire, a little bit more fun maybe. I put music underneath it to break up the sections, and it was almost like a little fun section, a little breather in between what was otherwise a lot of storytelling. And it makes for a nice composition overall. I really believe that. So whether it be, treasured possessions, whether it be your favourites, we also did a time when I felt. So it'd be a time when I felt happy, a time when I felt sad, a time when I felt jealous, a time when I felt, whatever it is that you want to discuss. But yeah, there are lots of examples of things you could do in that short form that can be quite eye-opening. So that is just a few ideas of the many, many topics that you could choose to focus on when recounting your life and the events that have taken place and the advice that you want to pass on. We didn't even talk about that, but you could do a whole section on advice. Mistakes I've made, things to avoid, the best £100 I ever spent, the best life advice somebody gave me. There's all sorts of things that you could do. My brain's going mad now just thinking about it. Anyway, I'll leave that up to you. Make some notes, get creative, and also I think that do talk to your family, your friends, whoever your audience is. People if you've got brothers and sisters who might want to be part of this process as well, include them in it, because they might say something that sparks an idea in you, and you go, "That's actually a really good topic to talk about, and I'd like to spend a bit of time talking about that." But yeah, I can't stress enough, organising your thoughts, organising your notes, and compartmentalising the chapters really that you're going to talk about is extremely helpful for being productive, and will keep everyone focused on the story that you're currently talking about, and it will provide a narrative throughout the whole piece. And I think that's really, really important. It really helped us. It really worked for my dad, and it's lovely for me to watch it in that way as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend. So without any further ado, thank you so much for watching this episode. I wish you lots of luck on this journey of writing your life story, and drop in the comments as well and let us know how you're getting on, or if you've got any questions or anything like that. And I'll endeavour to answer any questions if there are any there. But in the meantime, good luck on the journey, and I'll see you in the next video.